H. Herman 6415. You and I were talking, and I was asking you if you were 35 years old or younger, and you said yes, and you didn't know what that had to do with anything. The reason I'm constantly talking about someone being 35 years old or younger is that it seems like that seems to be roughly the cutoff point that the education system drastically changed or something happened to people of that time period. So what I kept trying to comment, but Gestapo Tube kept deleting, was that if you're under a certain age, you have been subverted by your public school, by your colleges. You've been taught lies. You've been taught facts, quote unquote, that simply are not true, anti-knowledge, and it was you were railroaded with it, mostly by public schools. And so people that are older than 35 don't seem to have a common ground with people under 35 so many times, because we received even if they went to public school, they received a better education than those who are 35 and younger today are receiving. So when people are arguing with me all the time, I will try to get them to look into the facts, and then they go to Google or whatever, and it sends them to sources run by people of the same age group that agree with them and teach them lies. So for instance, the word atheist. Just look at anything historical. Look at movies, TV, books, dictionaries. The word atheist comes from the Koine Greek theos, and in English, the word atheist means there is no God. It is to make the statement, there is no God. It is not what is commonly now called a soft atheist. That's ignorance. There's no such thing as a soft atheist or a hard atheist. There's atheists and non-atheists. If you don't believe in a God, if you're not saying there isn't a God, you just don't know, you just don't believe, then you're an unbeliever. And so I ask people to look up these words because they're looking it up in modern dictionaries, and modern dictionaries are garbage. Modern dictionaries cater to ignorance. So that I have seen myself in modern dictionaries where it will say Washington, D.C. Wash the dishes. It'll use the word wash as a pronunciation. It's like, nope, that's not accurate. No, you're catering to ignorance. Library. I suppose, let's go get some books at the library. Let's watch the Andy Griffin show. It's Andy Griffith. But what you and I were discussing was the history of Islam is a history of violence, blood, murder, mayhem, child rape, and so on. It's a long history. But they don't want you knowing that, so they try to hide the history from you. You have to go to actual historical sources. And so people will say, well, what about the history of Christianity and its violence? There is none. Now, people might be watching this or throwing their keyboards on the floor or tossing their soy milk across the room. But there's no violent history of Christianity. There's a violent history of Roman Catholicism, and there's a huge difference. Roman Catholicism is not Christianity. It's not. If you don't believe me, get a Bible, King James Version if you're English speaking, read it and compare it to what Roman Catholicism teaches, and it's like, on so many points, it's the polar opposite. Their priests are called Father. That Francis the Talking Mule in the Vatican, he's the Pope. Pope means Father. What does the Bible say? You're not to call them Father. The Bible teaches salvation by grace through faith. They teach salvation through faith and works, or through works. If you're good, you go to heaven. If you're a good Catholic, you go to heaven. Polar opposite of the Bible. But in many things, you're not allowed to know this because you've been subverted by public schools, by colleges. the things you learned about evolution, Darwinian evolution, what creationists would call macroevolution. Yes, biological animals and things like that, they vary within a species or within a kind, a baramin, a family. So I'm walking barefoot today. I will, quote, evolve by growing callus. Or at least my feet will get tougher. But they'll never become Goodyear tires. The genetics are not there. So creationists believe in microevolution, which we call variation within a species, or adaptation. There's nothing wrong with this. This is fact. That type of evolution is true. What we disagree with is macroevolution, that given enough changes, eventually, somehow an object, like an animal, a chicken will eventually become an alligator, or an ape will become a man. And that's not true. Macroevolution is not true, because you can have minor changes, yes, over a period of time, little changes, but that's based on whatever genetics are already present. Ask any farmer. There's a limit to genetics and what you can do with it, how you can rearrange it, bring certain features to the surface. So in school, you would have been taught, in public schools, you would have been taught that macroevolution was true. One type of an animal becomes a completely different type of animal given enough time. A bird becomes a dinosaur becomes a bird, whatever. They change it back and forth, it seems like. And that's not true. And the facts that you learned in school, many of them were already known to be false. And other ones have been since proven false. But the curriculum won't update. Texas, the last I knew, is the only state in the union that forces public schools to update their curriculum. And when they have found that there is an error in the textbook, something that was later disproven, usually by pro-evolution scientists, it has to be removed. And as far as I know, Texas is the only state in the country that actually enforces that. And I know a man who's actually expert testimony in court because he wanted the errors, the lies in textbooks removed. So he was involved in court over this, and I think it was the defense for the state said, well, if we remove all the stuff that's not true, what are we going to teach the kids? So, Gestapo Tube likes to delete stuff. I tried to explain some of the stuff to you earlier. I tried breaking it up into multiple different paragraphs, multiple comments. There's certain key words you can't use. You start speaking against Islam, you get deleted. You speak against Christ, oh, that's okay, that's safe ground. But once you speak against Islam, it's racism, because Islam is a race. So, I can't remember if there's any other points. Yeah, so if you're under 35 years old, you've probably been subverted if you went to a public school. Your head is filled with anti-knowledge, stuff that is not true. So when they say, I had a guy yesterday, yeah, all the founding fathers, they were all high on weed. And look at this country, what it's become. Oh. No, they were not high on weed. And I said, no, they were not high on weed. And he said, Abraham Lincoln grew hemp. I'm like, even if it's true he grew hemp, hemp was not used for drugs. Hemp was used for textiles. But he's been fed this anti-knowledge, and there's no getting these people, it seems like, to listen to the facts. Go look at the actual sources. The next time you're told, the founding fathers were pro-slavery, blah, 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 and they owned slaves, blah, 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 go look at the actual sources. When someone quotes from a source, go look at the source, because a lot of times they take it out of context and they have the person saying the exact opposite of what they were trying to say, because they pull it out of context. So if I say, an atheist says there is no God, and then someone clips that and says, look at this, Baptist Joshua says there is no God. That's because it's ripped out of context. Go to the actual sources. Don't believe anything, basically anything you're taught in public schools. It's usually lies.